All righty. I'm going to be presenting on emerging threats for 2021. A lot of us are business owners, entrepreneurs, perhaps maybe subject matter experts in the cybersecurity world, or maybe we're just thinking about getting into it. I thought that I picked a handful of threats that are very relevant to us in small business and big global companies. So it's going to be able to touch every single person here that is, experiencing this conference here. All right, so let's go on. So this isn't, this is an unknown. Cybercrime is habitually growing, and we're living in a growing digital era, right? I mean, everything it touches our lives, from iPhones to, internet media and social media. It used to be, can everybody remember how it was 15, 20 years ago? It's kind of picked up a phone if you wanted to talk to someone that was attached to the wall. And now we have all of data in the palm of our hands. And it's a very exciting time, but it's also very frightening. And I can't even imagine what that's going to look like when it comes to our children. But, we have the web sites and the dark space, and with technologies growing, it's becoming darker and more complex. And if we're not ahead of the game, if we're not proactively being vigilant, I mean, this thing could really be self-destructive. And so it's important that all of us have a great sense of sobriety when it comes to cyber security. As I mentioned, this is going to be briefly my outline. We've got a handful of emerging threats, but I'd like to focus first on the 5 key security pillars, right? Then we'll go into the different threats and different potential solutions. And finally, challenging all of us: are we ready? Are we prepared to, resolve some of these issues and figure out what our ready status is? Most of these threats target peer-to-peer businesses, and especially governments now, right? We have one government, competing against another world government, whether it's for oil or electricity or certain resources. But we're seeing that cyber warfare is becoming the go-to confrontational medium when it comes to trying to win the battle. So everything has become obviously digital. So we need to be, again, prepared and proactively looking for cybersecurity protection solutions. So thinking on that note, we think about the 5 security pillars, right? The first one is safety. The solution, whatever it is, needs to ensure all reliability. All of the copies of our data, most critical sensitive data, is available to all employees. We need to be sure that there's accessibility, organizational technical footprints. I mean, again, accessible anywhere, anytime. We have to ensure that there's no corruption, right, when it comes to our data. Also, that there's privacy. When we think about privacy, organizations have to have complete control over all the access of the data when it comes to our personal information or corporate personal information. That's very sensitive data that is very valuable to competing companies. We also have to think about authenticity. When we think about authenticity, we think about organizations that are able to create and demand verifiable proof of copies, specific, precise copies, replicas. And this is very critical when it comes to backup data, right? Or disaster recovery and business continuity practices. There's no doubt that I've used it within my organization. When something's corrupt, we got to go back. So how can we authenticate and ensure that that replica is the exact original replica of what we're trying to restore? Then we think about security, again, our 5th pillar when it comes to a solution. Organizations have to be ready, the percentage of ready preparedness in respects to being protective, or having that vigilant ideology of being protective and preserving the entire infrastructure. We have to challenge ourselves. Are we thinking about it? Does it keep us up at night? Are we dividing these responsibilities so that we could all work together with these 5 key pillars? So without much further ado, let's talk about one of the most controversial and exciting issues that we'll be facing: AI poisoning attacks. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with AI learning, but just to be very brief and not to go too high level nerding, but You know, artificial intelligence is almost interchangeably machine learning, and it's designed these applications to develop as to how to make decisions, how to predict outcomes by using very complex algorithms that are inspired by just human nature, right? It's simulated thinking, and I'm not going to go into all the binaries and zeros and ones, but there is a science behind threshold decision making and an ultimate outcome. Anyways, AI is really growing, right? I mean, you see it in automobiles, you see it in electronically and responding to, customer service requests. But the AI poisoning is becoming an emerging threat in respects to adversaries, right? I mean, it's become very complicated, some of these attacks. And the perception here is that when an individual is able to poison or inject bad data into a model's training pool, remember, that's the information, the way they're thinking, the AI, the way they're decision making, the algorithms, they're able to all of a sudden change a certain habit or attribute. For example, there's two ways to actually corrupt or change boundary shifts when it comes to AI poisoning. Number one, it's the machine learning's availability, right? The second is to target their integrity, also known as backdoor attacks. And that could be very, very, very powerful attack when you take total control through the backdoor. But let's give a good example. So we have all these automobiles, and they're driving independently. I'm not sure if they're legal in your country, but we're starting to see these AI applications running automobiles. And can you imagine that if one of them has been predetermined to believe that when they see a green light, it means to stop. And when you see a stop sign or a red light, it means to go. And that's what they're attempting to do. Now, let me tell you how powerful this is. Just by poisoning 3% of the machine learning data, it leads to 11% drop in accuracy. So just think about all the decisions you make in one day, and 10% of it, you are inaccurate with it. For example, if you choose to go through a door, you're going to the hallway, and instead of going to that direction, you go the opposite direction. Or if you've programmed yourself to raise your right arm, but now all of a sudden your left arm starts to be raised. So you have to understand that 10% of just the compromisation of accuracy rates is very destructive. Now, there's a handful of ways to actually do this. You have the logic corruption, which I'm not going to go into too much detail, but a lot of this has to do with whether the adversary has a black box information, which means they don't know anything, or are they doing a white box attack? And white box basically just means that they fully know the application, the type of AI, and the more they know and understand, and the way they understand the binary, it's easier for them to inject this type of poison. Anyways, these are a handful of ways to go ahead and poison AI. These are different types: logic corruption, data manipulation, data injection, transfer learning. This deserves its own presentation, and perhaps maybe next year we'll go into all the different ways of how an AI poisoning attack actually physically works in action, and what are the remediations. So let's talk about that. What do we do to stop it? Well, there isn't 100% science. It's still in its infancy stages. But the most common way to defend yourself from AI poisoning is to go through, implement a counter defense or an outlier detection. It's also known as data sanitization, and implementing also anomaly detection. Now, why is this important? And I'll kind of explain how that works. So when an AI is poisoning a learning machine, all of a sudden that data is foreign, isn't it? It's very different from the previous learning understanding. And so if this is the case, what this application does, or this process, is that it measures existing pool of data versus this foreign data. And so by default, once it's detected, it should, again, challenge this foreign data with model accuracy, and knowing it's foreign. So it should reject it and then remove it from the learning pool. And that's one of the things that AI poisoning counter response solutions are being, those type of methodologies are being implemented. What's really cool is these are some major players in the AI sphere, is the cybersecurity field. You got Darktrace, you have FireEye, you have Checkpoint. So these are some pretty big heavy hitters, Symantec, Vectra. Ransomware, right? I mean, we just went through a major ransomware crisis here in the States. It's always habitually happening. What's kind of really scary is that it's a lucrative tactic for cyber criminals. I mean, once they're in your machine, you're kind of screwed, right? I mean, usually they'll have an entire hard drive. They may have a server. Heck, they might have an entire network, and they own your data, right? And it's impossible for you to continue day-to-day operations until you yield to them. A lot of the mediums in which ransomware is distributed is through phishing emails and downloads and files. I mean, you got to be careful as to what in the world you're opening up these days and what kind of links, you know, are being sent to you. But, you know, once the perpetrator has your stuff, you know, they're not going to unlock it or give you the, you know, once it's encrypted, they're not going to give you the key until you pay up. And guess what they're paying? They're paying in Bitcoin. Now, what's wild is that this is the fastest malware type, this ransomware, that's growing in the United States because it's 750% from last year. That's colossal. And they're guesstimating over $6 trillion dollars in damages in 2021. This is like the go-to medium in exploiting individuals and revenue share when it comes to making money and so forth. So this is an amazing medium we have to be very vigilant and sober-minded about. So what are we going to do? There's so many things that we can do when it comes to ransomware solution, but I'm going to just go through them very quickly because, again, we have limited time. You know, one of the most important things is, you know, back up your systems, backing them locally. That's what I do. I have a cyber range here at the office. I load mine virtually on offshore. It's in the cloud. It's everywhere. I have multiple redundancy system programs that are constantly making copies of everything I own. Secondly, segment. Dissect your network, for crying out loud. There's no reason why, and this solution that I'm making right now is the solution for a handful of these different emerging threats. But you know, if you have an executive team, why are they in the same network, right, as your regular employees? Or why is the financial or a team that deals with level 3 or tier 3 issues, why are they in the same circle as perhaps maybe the executive team? Or why are visiting individuals, you own a hospital and there's individuals that would like to visit their grandparents. Why is the visiting wireless connection the same, you know, in respects to a flat network as the executive team? Learn to segment, dissect, create lots of local area networks or VLANs. You know, install early threat detection systems or anti-malware ransom software. They're out there. You'd be so surprised. I work with a handful of companies, just recently a nonprofit. They had no malware, anti-malware, no ransomware software. They didn't have anything that was available. And why it's important is because they prevent, they detect, and they also respond. Have a frequent, regular scheduled security scans. What good is software if you're not constantly updating the vulnerabilities and you're not constantly scanning for issues on your computer? Again, also very important, create and restore recovery points. That's very obvious. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Train your employees in education and educate them when it comes to ransomware. You'd be surprised, especially in emerging countries or third world countries, ransomware is still somewhat like a mystery. And I think that the more education in the workplace and in the home, the more sophisticated we can become in counter responding against emerging threats like ransomware. You know, use strong passwords. You got to try to avoid doing the 1, 2, 3, 4 or 8-digit password. It's time to move on to more complicated passwords. The more complicated they are, the more sophisticated and longer it takes for me to crack them. I mean, that's what we do. We're a penetration testing, cybersecurity, cyber threat analytical organization. Another thing is use your brain. Think before clicking. I mean, is this something? Look at the email it's coming from. Is it .jp? Do you really want to open that? Does it look elementary, the email? Is it questionable? If it's questionable, delete it. There's no need to even look into it. There's even other more sophisticated set up viewable file extensions like PDF, and Microsoft has those kinds of things. Anyways, these are just a handful. I had 20, but these are 10 of the easiest ways to avoid becoming subject to ransomware. How about this? Deepfake audio and video threat. Pretty cool stuff, right? You know, in the cybersecurity landscape, deepfake technologies are set to become like one of the biggest major threats against businesses. And think about it. When you think about deepfake audio and video, it's synthetic media, photos, videos, audio files manipulated by, again, AI, artificial intelligence. So just think about it. A lot of these video deepfakes, they're created by algorithms that are used to replace one person's voice or the way they look and the way they're acting. It's becoming unbelievably sophisticated, and although there's still a huge gap between what's fake and what's real, that gap is slowly closing. Now, maliciously speaking, deepfake technology could basically just pretend, let's say for a politician or a president or a prime minister to say or do something, or let's say even a CEO say or do something that they never said or did. And this is a huge a way to respond in a political affair or in a governmental race. So this, unfortunately, is becoming very popular. What's this purpose? Well, change public opinion, defame the person, create propaganda. I mean, this is some serious psychological terrorism. In any circumstance, it's being used, and we've got to, even though it's becoming more sophisticated, it's still, we've got to be sensitive to the reality that it's here to stay. So what's really cool about this is that even though it's an emerging field, and there's still a lot more to learn from it, the reality is that there are some applications. One of them is which is really cool, created by Microsoft. Microsoft created some sort of new tool that claims that it can detect fake video and audio, sounds or voices, or just deepfake in general. And what they do is this software, this technology can give you a percentage of accuracy. Is this really this person? And I think some of those checks and balances are used even now, even with, notice on the top right-hand side, Microsoft on the issues, you see the check, and it would give it some kind of validity to whoever it is that you're interfacing with. Is, you know, is this really that person? Another thing you could do is implement specific technologies against deepfakes based on artificial intelligence, like AI versus AI. And I mean, might as well doing that. And what it does is, without getting into the technicalities of it, is you can, it implements or it installs kind of some noise making pixels and videos. It responds by preventing certain modifications of images or videos that are already out there, which is pretty cool. It analyzes frames or acoustic spectrums, right, to detect is there any type of distortions. So this is becoming a really emerging field, and there's a lot to be said. Next year, we're going to have a lot more options in respects to solutions. Social media spoof. I mean, how many of us have been subject to social media spoof, right? Somebody emulating us or pretending they're our company, but it's amazing what hackers are doing. But when you start thinking about a spoof social media account, you know how big of a problem that is? I just went back to 2014 to 16, looking at some of the studies from Stanford University, and they literally found this percentage, 2 to 3%, or 60 million fake Facebook accounts, 48 million fake Twitter accounts, 24. That is a colossal amount. And look at the percentages in these spaces. 2-3% in Facebook, which I know is a lot higher now. Twitter up to 15%. 15% of all Twitter accounts are social media spoofs. Can you imagine that? Accounts. So when you start thinking about this, it's the increase is colossal. I have here just on our presidencies, just for Trump, just of late, doesn't matter what your political position is, but this is also was for Clinton, is that they found 40, 60 pro Clinton, 115 pro or big Trump accounts. So this is obviously a habitual problem, and the government had a very difficult time micromanaging this. So what do we do when it comes to social media spoofing? Well, the first thing is I actually wrote search. First, search. Look around and see if there's accounts about your person, and do it monthly. Have you ever done that? You went online or just on Facebook to look your own name? Do that monthly. Look to see if someone's impersonating your company or your person. Look up for images. Check that out. Have you ever looked up an image online in Google and to see where it's linking to? Is that where you want it to go to? Is it going to, let's say, a local article? You were a champion road racer, right? I was a triathlete, and it was talking about your glory. Here it is, picture Ray Friedman, champion of the world. Or is it going to a malicious or derogatory website? And it's very critical that you go and are proactive searching for your own person. Do it often. The second thing is block them. Block fraudsters from trying to connect with you. I think it's the most ridiculous thing that we just allow anyone independently just to come and become our friend on Facebook. I mean, and the reason why is because you're able to expose yourself on Facebook. When I start doing hacks on CEOs or directors and executive teams, I look and I hunt them down. I search everything on a site to find out who they are. And I get all the laundry I want. And so here you are, kindly just becoming a friend of mine. Let's say I have malicious intent. And now I'm able to get all of your images and your pictures. And so the second thing is block people, block fake accounts, and block individuals you don't know, or at least don't accept them. I don't know why we're all accepting people we don't know, right? Thirdly, report. Trust me, there's always a department in which you can report these fraudulent accounts. So you got to be proactive. So I would say search, block, report, and stop. All right. Remember, impersonators have incredible power. Let's not give them our power because we are frivolous and lackadaisical when it comes to our personal information. That's power. Don't give it away. This is pretty big. Nation state, kind of a little bit bigger than us right now, but I thought it would be very important because we do have adversary countries that especially in the States, that we're globally going to war against. Is cyber warfare. It's silent, it's quiet, yet known. So, what is a nation state attack? And it's when a licensed nation state actor from a separate government, and it works to target against another government to obtain valuable intelligence, intellectual property. And so if it's most of the time, it's either going up against the government or it's attacking a very large company. So just think about why they would do it, right? We're going through this COVID pandemic. What do you think is the most prized item that any government could get immediately while we're all dying of this pandemic? What is it? It's a vaccine, right? Well, the United States has invested hundreds of billions of dollars, multifaceted mediums of technology and companies and divisions and intelligence to try to rapidly find this vaccine. Well, what better way to do it is than to steal the research and development? Let's say a foreign and hostile country they don't have the money, but they've got the cyber warfare means to steal that research and development. So that's basically what we're looking at when it comes to national or nation state attack threats. But let's go ahead. And usually, again, these are advanced persistent threats when it comes to high level attacks like this. So what do we do? I'm going to tell you right now, the most powerful thing is number one, I know we like to get inexpensive things from some of these adversary or nations that do people harm. The first thing you should do is stop buying technology from them. Why would you buy applications or technology from a hostile neighboring country when you know they want to destroy your control the world? So they're selling you an application technology that they're intimately familiar with. You don't think that they haven't developed some form of malware? So if they want to destroy something or someone, they can unleash it. Number one, stop acquiring technology from companies out of nations that pose a threat to your country. Secondly, if you are utilizing, and we are, because we're in a digital age, always isolate your network. Always. Because if one part of your network goes down, or somebody compromises an outside network, it takes a lot more effort and energy to penetrate in the most important level of access controls, the executive circle. So the more you isolate, the harder it is to actually penetrate to where your most prized intellectual property or trade secrets are. Number three, share your cyber threat information. Listen, when something happens to you, share it, educate the masses, let them know what they could do to respond. And then finally, enhance employee cybersecurity awareness programs. There's nothing more powerful than knowledge. I mean, we have the Cybersecurity Awareness 1 from Mile2, which we're more than happy to give away on any participants here, free awareness education. We want to do that because we want to empower you. And it goes over, very simple things of phishing attacks and passwords, but you'd be very surprised how ignorant a lot of us are. And I don't say that negatively. I'm saying that a lot of us are in the dark and we still haven't taken this very seriously. So it's very important to obviously have a sense of cybersecurity awareness in your company. Zero-day exploits, that's one of my favorite. I mean, what is this thing, right? A zero-day exploit is an attack that targets a new and unknown weakness in a software. Zero-day refers to the number of days a vendor has had to fix a security issue. That means that nobody else knows about it except the person that's been able to discover the vulnerability. And usually on the norm, when someone has malicious intent, it's not the nice guy, right? So technically that application is unpatched. So I will tell you this, statistics are saying that 30% of all companies are going to face, like developed applications especially, are going to experience some form of zero-day exploit. Think about what I just, so if you have a company, percentages aren't great, right? So we have to be vigilant about this. Another thing too is, which I'm going to go into it, is these zero-day exploits are for sale. They're in the market space, which is absolutely disgusting because people dedicate their lives to destroy other people, which is unfortunate when we should be helping out each other, especially within this community. But hey, you want a zero-day exploit? Let's go to the zero-day exploit market space. I mean, I'm not going to put the companies in there, but if you want an exploit, man, they're in demand, and it depends on how much you want to buy it for. It could be a few $100 bucks. It could be a few $100,000. What's in demand? Privilege escalation exploits, Safari remote code executions, sandbox escapes, pre-op remote executables, authentication bypasses, all kinds of stuff in the market space, right? Let's see. So how do we counter respond to these zero-day exploits? Well, the first thing is patch, patch, patch. I can't tell you how many times I've done these penetration tests, and they're supposed to patch items. And when they're patching them on habitual, time frames, habitually, that means that the vendors like Microsoft or whoever it is, that vendor that supports your application, are constantly loading obvious patches to help secure your infrastructure, your products, your applications, your boxes, whatever it may be. But sometimes patches aren't always enough. Sometimes you have to install, and sometimes you should always install antivirus software that have zero-day antivirus behavioral-based detection systems. And basically that just means that obviously any types of behaviors that define or fall in the realm of zero-day exploits, or the type of, they're able to go ahead and recognize it. But these are some pretty good vendors: Bitfineer, Malwarebytes, and OS Changes. But I'm going to tell you, one of the best ways to fight against zero-day exploits is to be part of the Open Threat Exchange community. When you're part of the Open Threat Exchange community, which was originally owned by Alien Vault and then purchased by AT&T, what you're doing is that they're receiving these key signatures of data, and once they do, they're able to upload new threats, and all of us are able to have access to those new threats. And what's really cool, like when it comes to hashes and IP addresses, what's really cool is you can go ahead and download these OTXs And you can go ahead right in your local data center and literally be able to assess what you have constantly through this open threat exchange community. So remember, education is totally powerful. Again, so much more could be said about that, and this demands its own presentation. DDoS threats. Oh my goodness, everyone's getting DDoS threats. I mean, 33% of businesses will fall victim to DDoS. It's one of the main ways. If you want to destroy someone, you just easily go ahead and launch a DDoS. And would you believe that a majority of DDoSs come from China? Can you imagine that? The reality is that for those who aren't familiar with it or haven't been subject to it, we've been subject to it. I have business peers who've been subject to it. It's pretty simple. You know, the objective is to shut down a website. Objective is to prevent other people from accessing that website, or just overloading it and just shutting it down. 33% of businesses are going to have to deal with this. Again, if you're a business owner today, you're going to be subject to DDoS and a lot of these emerging threats. Some of them are really powerful, 1.35 terabytes per second. Wow. I mean, they do an average mean where many of these companies are going to suffer around 40,000 average mean losses. That's pretty powerful. And some of these DDoSs are UPS fragmentation, charge gen attacks, DNS, SPD, PD floods. That's pretty big. TCP anomalies. This is basically what you're looking at. So how do we fight against these things? You know, number one, it's very important to hire a cybersecurity professional, educate that individual. They should go and learn what it is, how to prevent it. What are the means? What kind of software? What kind of applications? Education is powerful. Secondly, buy some monitoring device or application, any incoming traffics. Why? It's important to know that it's able to trigger it before this issue or this attack becomes too big to handle. Let's see, another way is, you got to understand that DDoS attacks are not just layer 7 issues. They are multiple layer issues. When you start looking at the type of attacks that they have, right? You've got let's see, well, I'm not going to go into all the many attacks. I will say this, that one of the greatest solutions is to have a DDoS provision. Meaning that before a DDoS attack happens, make sure that you have a DDoS company dealing with your DDoS issues before your CEO goes into a DDoS frenzy. What do I mean? I mean, you're too small to deal with a lot of these DDoS attacks. What business do you have trying to manage your own network when it comes to this type of, issue? Transfer that liability to the king of DDoS management, which to me, I'm going to go straight into Cloudflare. And one of the reasons why I love them is because they not only provide a free version of DDoS protection, which means everybody should have it, but they also provide a business option, which is amazing. It protects layer 3, layer 4, level 7 attacks. And it's really necessary for both businesses and corporations. I love Cloudflare because it has over 100 locations of data centers all over the world. They are the king. Not only that, they can handle up to 10 terabytes of flooding. Isn't that crazy? So they can cope with all kinds of different attacks. They have 24/7 service, and even when you're under attack, they're available. So there you go. That's free marketing, Cloudflare. You know where I am. Okay, mile2.com. All right, let's see what else we got. So here it is. We've come to the end. Here we are, 2021, emerging threats. I've just presented a handful of them, with spoofing accounts, zero-day exploits, AI poisoning attacks. You got to ask yourself, what's your flavor? What most likely are you going to be subject to? And the main question I have for you is, are you prepared? Are you ready to deal with this emerging mammoth of an industry that's so diversified and so available and so vulnerable? And you may think you're insignificant, but remember, there's two different types of players. You have individuals who just want to destroy small businesses and individuals just because. You have others that just want to capitalize and make a dollar on other people's misfortune, destruction. And then you have others who do this as a profession. They're professional hackers. They're professional analysts, and they do this for a living for governments and nations and companies, and they're stealing and taking and destroying. Are you prepared? It starts with education. Educate yourself. Learn what it is to be secure. Become sober-minded. Be vigilant. Be a cybersec warrior. And I'm going to tell you, we are all going to have to learn to wear that cap. None of us are going to be immune to it, no matter how big or small we are. As long as we're connected into this digital, as long as we're still plugged in, my friend, you better get ready because the threats are coming. And that's my presentation. Thank you for having me.